Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Dynasty Hour. Justin will be joining us back here in a second, but I am Andrew LeDuc, a.k.a. Mr. Mallet, and Mr. Chuck Bass here with me. As always, we are without Jagger tonight, but he will be returning to us next week. We got some good stuff on the docket tonight. As you said right before in our little backstage, football's back because now guys are getting arrested, and it's like the real deal again. Like it's we'll see what we'll get into that. But how are you tonight? Let's kick that off. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm over what happened last week. I'm trying to move on to greener pastures. You're right to bring up the arresting. Antonio Brown has been doing the best he can to carry the torch outside of the NFL. He is doing crazy shit left and right. So I'm glad to see somebody finally get involved who's actually playing for the league right now. So it's just the happy medium. It's what I feel like I've been missing from this season. It's thumbs up.
Yes. And Justin joins us. Justin, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing fan-fucking-tastic. I traded Tony Pollard, or I traded for Tony Pollard and Devonta Smith. All I had to give up was Raheem Mostert and Tank Dell. I'm feeling fucking fantastic today, boys.
Yeah, that's a good flip. That's a good flip.
Celebrate.
We're gonna get into some of those guys later, but first let's hit it up with the local news, not the local news, but the recent news in the NFL. And we touched on it already. Let's touch on Chris Olave a little bit here because he got arrested down in Louisiana. I think it was early Monday morning. Going, I think it was only 35 over the speed limit, which yes, that does technically classify as reckless driving. But gosh, to get arrested for that seems a little wild. So two questions. Do you think there's something that's going to drop here that we're just not hearing yet? Maybe there's a little bit more to this that he got arrested for. And two, and I lost my train of thought, so just answer number one first.
Justin, you want to tee off?
I'm just surprised how stoic that cop was when he said, "Hey, I'll play for the Saints, right?" He said, "And?"
Yeah.
I was about to say, this motherfucker could have just said, "I'm a Falcons fan." And it would have been locked in, bro. He would have been all over that. I would have been all for that cop for president for 2024 after that. But yeah, I mean, shit, like Chuck said at the beginning, would it be an NFL season if somebody wasn't caught speeding at some point and arrested? I mean, it was Josh Jacobs, I think, like 2 years ago. Last year, Jordan Addison's already beat him to the club this year. So, it's just an exclusive club for every fantasy player to join. And, Chris Olave just punched his ticket. So now he's just got to punch a couple more tickets, like score a touchdown and, have 1,000-yard season, all those things that you need to be a viable fantasy football player. He's already got that arrested for speeding punch. So keep on working at it, kid. You get a free ice cream at the end of that punch card.
Nice.
Free ice cream.
Yeah,
go for it, Chuck.
No, I'm right there with you. And it's funny. It's like this cop is obviously not running for office or anything like that to be messing with Saints players locally. And that's okay. Not everybody has, some guys just want to uphold the law. This really is like kicking Olave when he's down, though, because when you look at everything that's going on with him, he feels very Kyle Pittsy as far as like wide receivers go and how he's being utilized. And really, I'm of the ilk that I don't believe it's his fault. All of his underlying metrics and like advanced stats all indicate that he's playing at an elite level, and he's just not. Everyone else is not holding up there in the bargain. Derek Carr can't throw it farther than the line of scrimmage, so it's just like, man, like this is just not what you want to see. But worse things have happened. Hopefully, he'll bounce back.
I think he will. I do think a lot because, like you said, if he could just get in the end zone, like I think we'd be looking at a completely different season for him here. So yeah, we'll see if it's all hinges on Derek Carr. I think that's the difference between him and you mentioned Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is one, the quarterback can't get on the ball, but two, that was like a whole organizational philosophy kind of error there. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Olave. I really think it's just Derek Carr. But let's get into Raheem Mostert too, because I want to bring this up because we are talking about some expectations later on in the show. And Mostert's an obvious, as I think the RB3 right now, an obvious kind of above expectations. But do you feel like we might be seeing a decline coming here? He had his first kind of really no-show week against the Eagles. And I mean, the Eagles, if you watch that game, they just gave him no room to run. They committed to stopping him. Do you feel like when a guy is exceeding his expectations of the seasons and a team finally gets a stop on him, do you think it's just an easy copy and paste for future teams to step in and do the same? Chuck, how do you feel about Mostert going forward? Can we expect him to stay at this level?
I'm not really concerned from an injury standpoint until they tell me he's not playing, because this has been the year of like either they're not playing or they're exactly who they are, or the coach is not reporting the information and we're getting fucked. So outside of the 0.001% that would ever happen, this is kind of it for him, because we know what's coming. We know who's behind him and we know who's coming back. So I don't feel as grim about the Eagles game. His numbers were not horrific, but you're right. They did keep him completely bottled up, which is the whole point of him, right? He's not like a plotter. He doesn't need to be ripping off like 4 or 5 yard runs. You want him to ripping off those home run hitters and be taking it to the end zone. So if he's doing that, absolutely declines coming. They were just an iron curtain against everything that they try to do. And sans that one Tyreek jailbreak in the back, I mean, they completely hammered them. So I'm going to hope that it's a bad game, because I don't know how many more cards the Dolphins have to play other than just continuing to get these guys out and open in space. But I'd definitely be nervous.
How about you, Justin? Any thoughts on Mostert before we move on these quick hitting news?
Yeah, so I mean, overall, when you really deep dive into the metrics, he didn't do terrible. It was the whole Dolphins offense that did terrible. They couldn't keep up, and Tua was getting sacked way too often. Like Chuck said, a real freaking this defensive line is for fucking real.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, they're nasty.
They've got a rookie D tackle that's probably going to be first team All Pro.
And you really reflect on it, and no offense to Anderson in Houston, but that should have been the third pick right there.
Yeah,
that should have been the third pick right there. Jalen Carter is just such a game changer, and he's somebody who anywhere would have absolutely improved a defensive line. You put him in Philly, and now you make it like the biggest game wrecker in the league. So I think this was more of a schematic fault to the Dolphins. They kind of fell behind, and they knew that they had to do it with Tua's arm and Tyreek's wheels, and they just couldn't get it done. Mostert has a really juicy schedule coming up. I know Achane is coming back soon, so it's going to be taking a little bit off. But you also got to remember, he had a 40-point game when Achane had a 50-point game. So it's very likely that these guys could put up 20-point games in the same game. Not everybody plays the Dolphins twice or the Broncos twice a year, so they don't get that luxury. But they do play the Raiders, the Jets, the Patriots, and the Chiefs. Not all of those teams are outstanding run defenses.
Oh, the Chiefs are better than expected at run defense. I will say that this year. They're still not outstanding, but they are better than we expected out of them. So I feel like that could be a surprise. But I get the point for sure. We'll see what
I was more or less pointing out the Raiders and the Jets being
defenses. No, I know. That thought popped to my head there when it came to the Jets. But someone who didn't have a bad week last week that we've been waiting for. Jahmyr Gibbs finally hits his breakout. Obviously, Montgomery banged up and kind of out of his way for this one, but this was the Jahmyr Gibbs that everyone was hoping we'd get from week one. So I guess the question is it here to stay? I mean, Montgomery could be back probably next week, I'd say. I think this week is probably still too soon, but Montgomery will come back at some point. It's going to be kind of hard to take the ball out of Gibbs' hands to the same percentage splittage that there was before. Do you guys feel the same way, or Justin, are you feeling that Montgomery's going to step right back into the usage he had before he got hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it changes some stuff around, but we also got to remember, and I was telling people this, it was a game where the Ravens kind of just kicked down the door, put it back up, and said, "You can't enter into your own house." Like they shut the whole game down for the Lions. They went in there and just completely obliterated Jared Goff. And by the end of the game, Jahmyr Gibbs getting that touchdown, yes, it's validation that you drafted him, and yes, he finally arrived. But I'm not putting it in that he is going to be getting 60, 70% of the touches now. David Montgomery is still very favorable in that offense. Dan Campbell still has some sort of love affair with these guys that are just brutes and bulldozers. And Montgomery has got a little bit more steam than Jamal Williams did. So he probably likes that a little bit better. But, I do like the trade value now for David Montgomery. I think people are going to be a little off on him. And if you're going in a redraft league, I think that's what you're looking for. And you might want to go try and snag him real quick. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, I agree, because that was exactly the point I was going to push to Chuck here, was that it seems like Montgomery's trade window has just gotten wider. This is kind of, if you were hoping to trade for Montgomery, Gibbs having a game like this while he was out was like the perfect recipe for you.
Yep.
So I'm assuming you agree. It seems like you agree, Chuck.
I absolutely agree. I still think we're going to see like this. Look at the run that like James Conner's just been on these last few years. And, it hasn't been like lighting it up from, an efficiency standpoint, but it's just like volume and touchdowns. And I think that's going to be where he eats. And like the best thing possible is that the Lions got like a complete prison hug, because that means that what they just did, it's not what they wanted to do. And they're going to try and get back to being in control, and they're going to get back to playing the way that they want to play. They played the highest 11 personnel they've played under Dan Campbell so far. They were just completely asked to play left-handed, and they couldn't do it. And it's nice to know that if it does come to that again, they can turn to Gibbs and get this high target games and everything like that. And he looked great when he was running at full speed. But the lack of Montgomery showed, and that's great if you're an owner or, like you said, somebody trying to acquire him.
Yeah, I think you both nailed it there, and it brought up another guy just came to my head who's also been out hurt, but who will be coming back. Could be another trade target is James Conner in my eyes, because that's running situation in Arizona looks confusing. I think is the best word. 1 week it's supposed to be Amari, and then it's not, and then the next week he's supposed to be on the bench, and it's him. Like, it seems like they don't know what they're doing without James Conner in the backfield. So James Conner coming back sometime in the next week or two here. Your window to buy him is going to close real fast, I feel like. So, we can move on unless either of you have anything to say about James Conner, but I just figured I'd throw that in there as well. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just saw this pop up today. This literally as I was putting the show sheet together a little bit ago. Apparently Tyreek Hill popped up on the injury report today for the Dolphins with a hip injury. Not much has been released about it yet, but it feels like, a hip injury for a receiver of his style. This is very concerning for me if I'm a Hill owner. I feel like we could be looking at least 1 week out here, but possibly multiple with the way hip injuries can linger. First of all, do either one of you own a decent amount of Tyreek Hill that you're now worried about here?
I will start off and say no. I own hardly any of them because I didn't see any of this Dolphin shit coming. So I'll take a huge L on that, and I'm not afraid to say it because I'm very happy for that it is happening. We need more of that. I would like the same thing with Mostert. I'm not going to balk at this until I know that he's not playing because he's just the most unbelievably reliable guy we've got going from the wide receiver position right now. So if they take that away, we're fucked. They're fucked.
Yeah. You couple that with the fact that Jalen Waddle currently has a back injury too.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be looking at, fucking going up Schitt's Creek without a paddle for the Dolphins for the next couple of weeks. So I don't think they want to do that. I think they're going to try and San Francisco it and get Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill out there as much as possible. I don't care what it is. Rub some damn dirt on it. Just go, because they can't afford at this point to be losing any more games with how, Buffalo has been slipping a little bit and the Patriots somehow pulled out a win, big win for the Patriots against the Bills. And those pesky Jets seem to still be in the race. So I think that they really need a W going into this week. So Tyreek Hill is most likely going to suit up. But to answer your question, I, like Chuck, did not see this coming. So I only have 2 shares of him. And oddly enough, those 2 shares were where I was auto drafted in the first round. So auto draft team kicking ass, baby.
See, in my home redraft league, we have an auto draft team who is 6-1 and in first place right now. And it annoys me. It annoys me that he wasn't there for the draft and the computer drafted it. And our whole league like flip-flopped this year from what it normally is. So this is like a, what's it called? Twilight Zone, if you want to say, in the fantasy football realm. But yeah, you mentioned my Patriots. I wasn't going to bring it up, but thank you. Did that happen this week? I'm not going to lie. I still would have been fine if they lost that game. I was just happy to have an entertaining football game as a Patriots game this weekend.
What's up,
like, I kind of
sleaze?
Halfway through that game, I was like, fuck it. I know they're going to blow this. I'm just happy that at halftime we have a lead and this is entertaining and fun, and I'm going to be satisfied with this today.
Yeah.
So
honestly, in this year, that's like half the teams aren't even getting that. So to be able to pull something like that away is it's pretty nice too.
And now you're telling me there's a chance for the Dolphins. You were saying, Justin, I know you didn't say it, but you were saying there's a chance we beat the Dolphins this week.
I'll ask you guys.
How close was that game last time?
I know it was. I know.
Close.
I know.
They were full speed and healthy.
Well, we're playing in Miami, and even Brady sucked in Miami. For some reason, the Patriots just do not travel well to Miami.
I'll ask you guys this: going into this year, you could ask 10 people, 10 analysts, where they had Tyreek and Waddle ranked in Dynasty, and you might see a 50% split between, are you talking 3-year window, 5-year window, whatever it is, some people might have had Waddle ahead of him based upon what we saw the previous year. Where do you guys land on how Waddle fits into your Dynasty? You don't even have to talk about rankings, but just more long-term.
So Waddle, I like sticking around longer than Hill, and because I still go back to it. It's hard for me to get the offseason comments, and I can't remember exactly what Hill said, but he had referenced when his contract in Miami's done, he's done playing football. Like, that's concerning. That even what, like they say, when you start thinking about retirement, you're retired. Like, it's that thought's in your head and you're kind of done at that point. He's obviously not done. He's playing out of his mind this year. So that causes me to think, okay, maybe he'll have a change of heart. So Waddle, from that standpoint, is a longer term asset for me, just from a time. But I've been a little underwhelmed with Waddle this year personally. I know he's now dealing with injuries too, but I've been underwhelmed. I thought he was going to be a lot higher up in the rankings right now, and he's. I'd have to look up exactly where he is right now, but he's getting not where I expected he was. I thought he'd be top 10.
That's happening this year. It's happening to T. Higgins. It's happening to Devonta Smith. They're getting alpha'd hard.
Yeah, but I wasn't surprised by T. Higgins. Remember, I had T. Higgins as like my 25th wide receiver, and people gave me shit for it. Now, granted, I was wrong about the other 20 ahead of him, but I'm going to victory lap on T. Higgins.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I love that. I love that you brought up T. Higgins too, because you're absolutely right. He's getting alpha'd. But T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle are kind of like the examples of guys that are good, and maybe they'll have like a top 12 season in here and there. But I don't think they'll ever be legitimately guys you want to draft in the top 12. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like Tyreek Hill, for the past however many fucking years Tyreek Hill's been Tyreek Hill, has been a guy you want to draft in the top 12 because of that speed. He's a lethal weapon. I don't think we'll ever get there with Jalen Waddle. I'm just saying that right off the bat here. Dynasty-wise, redraft-wise, I don't think we'll ever get there. I think Jalen Waddle will always be somebody who's available in the second round.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Unless you get a Mad Dolphins fan, then I can't help you there.
You got Jason drafting in your league. Watch out.
Right.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think what's difficult this year is I feel like fantasy scoring as a whole feels down this year. So I feel like we look at guys' points and we look at our team's points throughout the year so far, and we just think like it's almost like you get this internal panic of I know where my points usually are, these guys' points usually are, and I gotta make some moves. When you realize they're still stacking up the way they should against the other players, it just everything looks weird this year when you're just looking at numbers on paper.
Yeah,
extremely.
Yeah. So But we're going to get into some more expectations, whether guys are exceeding them or not meeting our expectations. But first, we're going to take a quick break here, listen to some Underdog Fantasy, and then we will be right back here to keep it going for you.
Fantasy Sports Corp and Underdog Fantasy have teamed up to start your fantasy season off in the win column with Best Ball. What is Best Ball? It's quite simply the easiest way to win. No team management, no trades, no waivers. It's their biggest contest ever and it has only gotten bigger. You simply have to sit and win. You don't even have to set your lineup. Always get your best score every week. Just enter a contest, draft your team, and Underdog will do the rest. What could make this even better? How about free money, up to $100 using our exclusive promo code? Go online now and use the promo code TSSDYNASTY to double your deposit up to $100. You tell them Gingerbread sent you. Good girl.
And welcome back. Gingerbread joining us on every show. Gotta love that dog. I've never met him, but whatever. We like Gingerbread here. Let's get into some expectations, though, because I put down a few here for us, but I'm sure we can freestyle because there's so many that's been up and down. I wanted to start with C.J. Stroud just because the importance of the QB position is crazy, and I feel like when it comes to the rookie QBs that we were watching, C.J. Stroud, had some attention, but he wasn't necessarily the guy we were watching, and he's just shown up ready to play from day one here. And it's funny because he's done it with Nico Collins. He's done it with a little bit of Tank Dell when he's been healthy. He hasn't been burning the world down and going crazy or anything, but he's just been consistent enough to where he's been more consistent than some of the mainstays in fantasy quarterbacks. So CJ Stroud, is this where you guys thought he'd be, or is he exceeded your expectations? Justin, we'll start with you.
Oh, he's definitely exceeded my expectations. I like the prospect, but as I told you guys in the offseason, I hated the destination. I officially am okay with the destination because obviously Bobby Slovic, he's got some juice going behind this offense right now. He is using every piece of it to their absolute potential right now, and it's looking fantastic in Houston. Stroud, it's even more impressive that he's doing it without his legs. He's just doing it as a pocket quarterback. I'm flabbergasted by how good this guy has been so far and how he's elevated the games of the once thought to be dead Robert Woods and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. All these guys that, in one way or another were kind of like forgotten assets in fantasy. And, now they're looking fantastic. And Nico Collins, the most forgotten asset in all of Dynasty football. If Nico was going to be something, and he had a nice little career at Michigan, but then he comes to the Texans where all good things seems to die, and somehow C.J. Stroud did his best. Dr. Frankenstein brought it back to life, and it's rolling hard right now. Nico is doing fantastic work. So I am very blown out of the waters by how good Nico Collins too, but CJ Stroud is. He has blown my expectations clear out of the water.
Well, no, you nailed it because the fact that I think the biggest thing you said is the fact that he's not doing it on the ground, because we've seen that where in Justin Fields early, that's where he had a success.
Anthony Richardson,
Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, all of them. The early success was on the ground. It's so impressive that he's doing it standing in the pocket, because you still know that running potential is there, and he'll utilize it at some point. But the fact that he's getting confident in a pocket situation is. I think it spells wonders for him going forward. He's a dynasty asset I want a lot of at this point. Do you think this is, Chuck? Interesting question for you. Do you think this is correlated to Dameon Pierce's kind of downturn here, or do you think Dameon Pierce is more so of the offensive line is terrible?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the offensive line is terrible, and I don't want that to be misconstrued as like I'm passing the buck, because when Devin Singletary can come in, who I do not like, when he can come in and even be slightly more effective than you, it kind of is just like, okay, it puts Dameon Pierce in somewhat of a box. But at the same time, like if you just take like a 10,000 foot step back and look at it, it just makes everything CJ Stroud is doing even more impressive. He's got no support that a lot of these other quarterbacks have come into, other than, like Justin said, from the coaching staff, which has been absolutely terrific. And of course, Nico Collins has been great as well. And like the Nico Collins things is interesting because the Texans have held on to him. He was in 2023, they didn't have their first or second round draft pick. And I think after they took Davis Mills, he was like the first guy. Yeah, third round pick. He was the first guy they took. So it's like they obviously didn't have a lot of cards to play that year. So they really, I mean, they've committed to him and he's weathered the storm. I feel like I'm watching Joe Burrow when I watch CJ Stroud play. I have him as my QB 9, just after Anthony Richardson and just ahead of Kyler Murray, kind of in that, like, you know, Tua's in that range and so on and so forth. I just hope that they go out and they get him a Jamar Chase type, which is what you need to elevate from that QB 9 if you don't have the dynamic rushing floor that a lot of these other guys have, because he's already putting in crazy volume, 6th in attempts, 4th in yards per game, 9th in touchdowns per game, 7th in EPA per dropback. And that's with Robert Woods and John Mechie playing serious snaps. No offense.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, with the kind of higher than expected season the Texans are having, I feel like they're going to be out on Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Yeah. Unless I think that at this point the best chance is if the Patriots continue to trend towards the top 5 pick, and then they just trade up, because Bill's most likely going to trade that pick away if the Patriots do end up with a top 5 pick. So we'll just see there. But I agree, he needs somebody legitimate. And I was quickly trying to look up, I don't know if the stat exists anywhere. I was trying to look up what his I didn't know if maybe Pierce's kind of difficulties this year was because he was being asked to block more in efforts of protecting Stroud, but I can't quickly find that stat anywhere. So if one of you guys happens to know if that's the case, spit it out. Otherwise, we will move on, because Player Profiler doesn't track that apparently. And that was the first thing I could type in. but we can move on to Travis Etienne, who right now is your running back 3. Travis Etienne, this is someone that I personally has been high on for 2 years now. This is kind of maybe not running back 3, but I'm not surprised that he's a top 5. This is about where I expect him to be, right around that 4 to 6 range. So he's slightly exceeding, but I'm gonna call it where it used to, where I thought he'd be. Chuck, I forget if you were in or out on Etienne. I feel like you were out. But inform us, update us. How are you feeling now with him as the running back 3?
This is where I sometimes forget that running backs can get better from season to season, sometimes at the same rate that a wide receiver or a tight end can. Because I did not take that into account, especially the draft capital. I mean, it's like the process was right. I'm just taking an L on this one. Yeah. They bring Tank Bigsby in, Doug Peterson's history, all the other weapons they have in the passing game, Trevor Lawrence taking a step, so on and so forth, all that stuff. Well, nobody took a bigger step, and I don't think there's few offensive players in the league that have progressed more from their comfortability in a particular offense than Travis Etienne. So it's just like, wheels up, man. He's young. He's attached to a stud offense. Just let it ride.
So you do bring up the point for me, though, that the one thing I was worried about was that because of how they handled the transfer of power between Robinson and Etienne, it felt very Patriots South-like, because that's what they did Damian Harris to Stevenson. And what I feel like is if they bring in another guy, I think Stevenson's safe now because there's no one behind him. But I could see the same thing happening just from, history down in Jacksonville. Justin, are you worried that they're going to just run Etienne into the ground now, and then for dynasty purposes in the years coming, we're going to be disappointed and he's going to be on our missing expectations list?
Yeah, of course. You always, but I feel like that's your logic about most running backs. I mean, the way that we kind of look at running backs nowadays is you're kind of just on your expiration. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of waiting for K9, for Kenneth Walker to kind of just at some point they're going to be Zach Charbonnet. I still have a ton of Zach Charbonnet redraft just because I'm like, fuck, if this is the week, then I'm set for the weeks going ahead. But that's unfortunately the mindset we put ourselves in, because there's no running backs that avoid it now. Like everybody hits it at least 1 week, 2 weeks, some unfortunately for seasons. There's nobody out there anymore like LaShawn McCoy, like Derrick Henry, these guys that were just standards going out in fantasy and always getting touches, always making stuff happen. And somehow either they got injured and they didn't tell anybody, or they got injured, they made it, and they made it out into the field. It just doesn't seem to happen anymore. I kind of think that, if you're built kind of like Ramondre Stevenson, maybe you can avoid that. But then you also have the bad weeks where Zeke will outscore you because he scores the touchdown. So, I'm not going to say ETN is going to be a bad asset for this year, but all I'm going to say is that I'm not really investing too much in running backs going into the future.
Yeah,
I'd rather just draft running backs from my rookie classes and get a running back here and there for maybe a pick or so, just kind of play it that way. Long-term assets, you always want to go receivers.
So you're thinking like an NFL team these days.
Yeah. I will say something that Travis Etienne, if you're an Etienne owner or looking to acquire, and something he shares with another running back we're about to talk about, is that, well, maybe not this next running back, but he is essential to the team success they're having. And he's really the only identity you can point to in Jacksonville that you can look to and go like, this is somebody who's playing at a superstar level that's translating into actual wins. And he's got 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games, and they're on a streak right now. And that is something that, like, as opposed to a lot of guys who are maybe putting up emptier stats that aren't necessarily translating, like you might have thought Ramondre was doing last year, although I still think he's a great player, just kind of like looking at success from 2 different angles.
Yeah, it's important. And we've seen a lot of that on Twitter and over the last week or two here where this been put out there a lot about, fantasy owners assuming NFL teams are going to do what we want them to do or what we think is right. And we do forget that these guys are playing on an NFL team in an NFL game, and it's not about our fantasy points. And some guys can be good for the team and not be good for our fantasy points. So it's a fantastic point you made there, Chuck. And look, we can roll right into this next guy because you kind of alluded to Tony Pollard here. I know that's who you were kind of trying to get to, but Tony Pollard is he's all right for his team. Like, I'm not even sure he's the Cowboy. I think he's underperforming the Cowboys' expectations of him. I know as running back 13 right now in PPR leagues, he is pretty much right where I expected him to be. But I know a lot of people, including a few guys on our show here, were very big on Tony Pollard. And I was seeing him go at the end of the first round and the start of the second round. This feels like a big underwhelming performance for the majority of fantasy players, in my eyes, out of Tony Pollard. If you're a Tony Pollard owner, Justin, are you happy, or are you you're just kind of chilling and expecting him to pick it up here?
Is anybody happy anymore?
No, nobody's happy.
The only person that's happy and he hides it behind his miserable mustache is Arthur Smith.
Yeah, right.
Everybody in fantasy. He's done it again.
I know. That's whatever they're doing down there in Atlanta. I don't even beyond fantasy. Like, how do they get away with it? I don't know. It's just that makes no sense. No sense.
Yeah, Atlanta is a whole show in on itself. We could talk about how that team underutilizes every aspect of it. But going back to the question, Tony Pollard. So I traded for Tony Pollard today for a reason. And my main reason is that I like the idea of a guy who's been injured, who's been staying steady this year, coming back and turning the corner. There are players that play early on, and then there are players that turn the corner. Like Raheem Mostert's a guy who's a perfect example. Went out there, guns blazing, has a history of injuries, and has somebody behind him who is faster. It's crazy to think of because Raheem Mostert's a fast motherfucker, but Devin Achane is faster, and when he was on the field was taking more red zone carries away from Raheem Mostert. So Raheem Mostert is one of those guys that I would say go sell him right now. Tony Pollard's one of those guys I'd say go fucking buy him right now because the schedule is getting nicer. They still have to play the Rams. They have to play the Seahawks. They have to play some of these teams that are a little bit easier on the run. And Tony's kind of had that little bit of time to really heal up. I expect him to get more involved in this offense as his offense kind of evolves from his archaic foundation, maybe getting him a little bit more passes. He's the type of guy that if you bought him or if you got drafted him high, you've been really disappointed so far, but maybe you can turn your season around in these upcoming weeks.
Well, yeah, it could definitely happen because to this point, not even just Tony Pollard, the whole Cowboys offense has been a disappointment. I mean, you got Dak Prescott as QB, I think it's 20, CeeDee Lamb is wide receiver 25. I mean, the Tony Pollard is still the highest ranked offensive weapon on that team right now. That whole show that's going on in Dallas right now is another big disappointment, especially given how they started the season with their defense. Their defense has even dropped off. Their defense from a fantasy standpoint isn't even like a hold even on their bye week situation for me anymore. I think defenses they fall into the just drop them when they're not playing and matchup dependent and pick up someone else. So Dallas is a mess still as well. Yeah, so Tony Pollard's right where I expect him to be, which is why I didn't draft him where he was going, and that is fine with me. The other guy that I wanted to bring up really fast is Justin Herbert at quarterback. This is a situation where I feel like he's still doing all right from a fan. He's still QB7, but this is like the reverse of what you said earlier, Chuck. From a team standpoint, for his actual NFL team, he's looking shaky. He's not looking great. He's been bailed out by Keenan Allen having a nice bounce back season after his injuries. But that's a situation there where I'm just waiting for the bottom to fall out, it feels like, because he just doesn't look confident, doesn't look good on the field. How do you feel about Justin Herbert moving forward the rest of this season? And does he make you, because he was like a top 3, I think, dynasty quarterback in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that, or are you kind of looking to flip him around for some other assets going forward? I think you had him involved in a possible trade like a week ago or so we were talking about.
Yeah, he's the more people, he's one of those guys where like I have blinders on because I've been so enthralled by his talent and how good I think he can be. But my foot's not out the door, but I'm side-eyeing it. I'm side-eyeing the door a little bit. Like, you know, when like somebody's talking to you and like your body language is turned that you're like, I'm about to leave this conversation, but you still are in the conversation. They won't shut up. That's how I feel about Justin Herbert right now. Best case scenario, he's in like his Trevor Lawrence last year where they still have growing pains with the offense. They're losing guys. Austin Eckler's not playing great.
Yeah.
Joshua Palmer has almost twice as many yards per game as Keenan Allen does since Mike Williams was injured. That's crazy. That's not how things should go. So if I'm glass half full in this, I'm looking at it as offensive growing pains. He has no offensive line. That continues to be a massive issue. The center being out has been the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like you just see how teams fold when they don't have their center. The Bucs last year are a great example of that. I mean, it's just the head coach is going to be fired. You're looking at bringing somebody in.
Should have already been fired.
Should have already been fired. Could not agree more. So I'm not panicking, but it certainly has, with all the other guys that are coming up in the league right now, he certainly has an opportunity to get lost in the shuffle.
Which is a shame because, like you said, his raw talent, the way he stepped into the NFL, you know, I think he won a playoff game his first, or did he just lead him to? I forget if they won or lost that first playoff game his first year. But still, it's just impressive from an NFL standpoint, from an athlete standpoint. Do you feel mostly the same, Justin, on Herbert? Or are you more confident in him?
No, I'm 100% more confident. I believe in the talent. I believe in the person himself. I think he's being asked to do way too much. He's being at this point asked to play offense and defense because he's being asked to score pretty much on every single drive because your defense can't sustain anything. Your defense is one of the most overpaid, lackluster defenses in the maybe the league has ever seen. I'm not going to say the entire league because it's probably the worst in the entire league overall when you look at the money that's been put into it. But it might be on that historical standpoint where you're overpaying for mediocre players. And big time. Exactly. Like fucking A, dude. Like Khalil Mack had 6 sack game, and he has pretty much been absent the entire season since. So I love the talent. I think he would have been one of the guys to really benefit from somebody like a Shane Steichen, somebody who can come in and really teach the quarterback position. You look at guys like Doug Peterson and Jacksonville, he would have been a perfect fit there. Somebody who can really get through to the QB and say, hey, man, this is what we need to work on with you. And this is what we're going to do, because he has all the weapons around him. Zero guidance. Zero guidance. He's
you
go ahead.
brought up a really good point as to where there's still somebody in the way, like there is in Washington, right? You bring Eric Bieniemy in. Well, Ron Rivera is still in the way. They're still playing and focusing on aspects of the game that aren't beneficial to the development of their offense. And that's exactly, you're so on the money. That's exactly what's still happening here. Even though they did bring in an offensive coordinator that we all like, but they're not giving him the layups. They're put no run game. What Josh Kelly did does not exist. That didn't happen in my world, and it will never happen in my world. So, really.
Yeah. It's true. I know. I saw Kelly balling out a bit and get that touchdown, and I was like, man, like a week or two after I'm telling people all the time, like Kelly's not it. Forget Kelly, move on. And I'm like, of course, that's the way this year's going. But anyways, we'll take one more quick break here. We'll hear from Jazz Casino, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some wide receivers and where they are falling in our minds of our expectations. We'll be right back.
Jazz, Sportsbook, Casino, and Racebook, the world's best resource for all-purpose online wagering. For over 20 years, Jazz has provided the best and quickest payouts in sports and entertainment wagers. Live sports betting, covering all the major sports leagues, and even into the new and exciting world of esports. Down the stretch you'll come, with Jazz's online horse wagering. Get paid when you play with Jazz's fun and exciting online casino games. Go online now and use the promo code TSS for our new members deals. Jazz Sportsbook, Casino, and Racebook, the world's best resource for online wagering.
Let's get into the wide receivers because, as Chuck said earlier, or Justin, I can't remember which one of you, wide receivers is where all the value is right now in all forms of fantasy football. And we can kick it off with one guy who I am going to admit I have been very wrong on this year. The Devonta Smith over A.J. Brown argument that I had is not playing out in my favor. A.J. Brown almost single-handedly beat me this past week. He scared me a lot. I still snuck out the win, but he has been absolutely balling out. Devonta Smith hasn't been terrible, but he's not anywhere near as high as I thought he'd be. So I'm going to say AJ Brown is far exceeding my expectations. I know a few of you guys were higher on him than me, though. So is he even exceeding your expectations, or is he about where you thought he would be? Justin, we'll start with you on AJ.
Oh, he's by far exceeding expectations. I was one of the guys that thought that Devonta Smith was going to come on, and I think the talent is still there. I think this is a Jalen Hurts problem as far as Smith goes. We want to talk about Justin Herbert having regressions. Justin Herbert has 4 interceptions. Jalen Hurts has double that. He has 8. This guy has major regression issues, but we're not talking about it because the Eagles are 6-1 right now.
Yeah.
So it's hard to talk shit on a quarterback that's leading the best team record-wise in the league right now. But the reality is that Jalen Hurts is really feeling not having Shane Steichen there. And is it Brian Johnson? Because Ben Johnson is the one in Detroit, right? The OC for the Eagles?
Yeah.
I think it's Brian Johnson.
Yeah, Brian Johnson.
Anyways, whatever his name is, it's just not getting through right now that, he has another elite number 1 receiver on the other side of the field, and he is just hyper targeting A.J. Brown to the point of Devontae Adams in the past, where he was getting 15 targets a game, no issue, 9 catches, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's what A.J. Brown is looking like right now, and it's absolutely money. But like I said, I think it's one of those things where it's interesting to see how Jalen Hurts slipping through the cracks right now because his team is winning. But he really should be facing some freaking serious, oh my God, is this guy really a real deal or not? Because he has just as many turnovers as he does touchdowns in this league right now. That's Danny Dimes-esque numbers.
Yeah, it worked out for Danny Dimes getting his contract and moving on, but and I feel like there's also the situation where DeAndre Swift is a lot better in this offense than they expected. He's running back 6, Dallas Goedert's tight end 7, and plus when you factor in just how good their defense has been, it's almost hit the point where they just haven't needed Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown's just been the guy that Hurts has been going to early in the games, putting up the numbers, and then by the time he's looking Smith's way, it's just not needed.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, like we said, for the Eagles. It's great for the Eagles. But if you're like me, it's terrible. It's a terrible look.
Well, it's just I don't think he's reading the field very well. Like you see him playing on the field, and he's just hyper looking for AJ Brown. It's AJ Brown or nothing most of the time. And you'll like see on the bird's eye view of the field, you'll be like, but Devontae Smith was wide the fuck open. Why didn't you look that way? Like what's stopping you from like seeing the entire field? I just don't think something's clicking right now for Jalen Hurts. But like I said, I have AJ Brown in one league, and I'm thanking him for it. It's been a phenomenal year there.
No, you're absolutely right. Again, they're just smashing the easy button this year. Like they're doing what a lot of teams they don't have the talent to do, but a lot of teams that do have talent aren't even approaching this level of like throw it to AJ Brown and then get the fucking tush push. That's like all they're doing this year. And you mentioned probably the most important part is they have a guy who's calling plays for the first time in the NFL. Even a new defensive coordinator on the other side. There's just a lot of change, and Jalen Hurts looks uncomfortable. So, like the games they've gotten Devonta Smith involved are so clearly games where they were like, all right, guys, we have to get Devonta Smith these targets. And they're still not translating to a ton because Hurts is just really not playing at that level. He's looking to run pretty consistently more than he was last year, at least from a scramble rate. So it's just they're just not as comfortable as they were in 2022. But what are they, 6-0, 7-0?
Well,
No.
they lost now.
Yeah.
Close enough, though.
Yeah. Jets fans are going, Chuck, come on, bro. Come on.
I think I just heard Freddie fall out of his chair.
I'm surprised he didn't pop on.
But another guy that we can talk about, Brandon Ayuk, is someone that we were all high on. And I think it's actually kind of hard to gauge Ayuk right now just because of the injuries that's been around on that team. Like I think we all know and still feel like his production would be where it is anyways. Which is right now he is I just lost him running wide receiver 18. So I actually thought it would be a little bit higher right now, but like we said, that offense has had some injuries, McCaffrey and Debo and whatnot. Does running back 18 satisfy you to this point of the season when it comes to Ayuk, though, with how excited we were about him all season? And Chuck, we'll start with you this time, and we'll let Justin freestyle on his 49ers for a little bit at the end.
This is a tough one because it's so indicative of where the league is right now, where there's more and more coaches coming in who are the quarterbacks of the team as opposed to the actual quarterbacks themselves. And it's not a Brock Purdy thing. Like this is just the Shanahan offense to where it's like, here's where you go with the ball. And I don't care who it suits up. It really does not matter to me who's playing quarterback for them, as long as they have accuracy and anticipation, which Purdy does. He's had a couple bad games here, but that's because teams are rolling out I say teams. He played Brian Flores in the Browns defense. Like those are difficult matchups that experienced veterans have trouble with to varying degrees, depending on what their offenses look like. But as far as Ayuk goes, I mean, this is a player who might just be too good for the system and whose talent might not really ever be fully realized until he's somewhere where they just lean on that alpha status, which sometimes you have to do that. Like, in Succession, he says like, sometimes what does it say? Sometimes it is a dick measuring contest. And like that happens in the NFL. Like you look at the Bengals. The Bengals scheme is awful. It's awful. But they just hammer talent. And while the 49ers have that in spades, they might have it too much.
Yeah. Well, and I think where we just saw, and maybe you'll say different here, Justin. I think what we saw this past week is things almost have to be perfect for this talent to work with Brock Purdy at the helm. Like he's not the guy that can. I don't think he's the quarterback who can make up for a night where the talent doesn't show up. I think he's a guy that can keep his foot on the gas of a Lamborghini at full speed. But if you're asking him to mess with the gears and use the e-brake to make a swift turn, like it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna be pretty. So, Justin, do you still feel like, are you still confident Brock Purdy can get the best out of Brandon Ayuk, or you think that's going to keep him from reaching the ceiling the rest of this year?
Yeah, no, I think he can. I think Brock's kind of had a rough go about it because, like Chuck said, these past 2 weeks have been tough because it's like you've got two schemes where blitzing is really relevant. And you look at the Vikings, they blitz on just about every other play. And that's just, they had a weird stat. It was like, I think it was like 57% of their plays they blitz on. So that's literally over half your plays. It's just all out blitz. And, the one thing this 49ers team doesn't have talent on when Trent Williams is not on that field is the offensive line. That offensive line is pitiful, and it's been pitiful for a long time. Kyle Shanahan has had plenty of chances to add picks through the draft, quality fucking players, and he decided to use it on kickers and backup tight ends. So this is all his fault and all his doing. I'll praise Shanahan when he's right, and I will call him out when he is wrong. The fact that Brock Purdy is not getting enough time for Brandon Ayuk to make the proper breaks and separate well from his corner, because he does do that. He is a separator almost at the level of Devontae Adams, because you watch when him on tape is a master class of route running. And it's 3 years built up of being fucking dogged on to be better. And this year, I still see it, man. I still see a top 12 finish for him this year because he's too goddamn good to not be a top 12 receiver. Realistically, he's too damn good to not be a top 5 receiver, but I will pull back on that because of what I've seen.
Well, it's very I liken his situation almost to we just talked about the Chargers, right? Like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams make each other better. And I see a lot of similarities in how Keenan Allen and Brandon Ayuk play the game. And you've taken Mike Williams out of that equation. It's actually hurt Keenan Allen. And that's not to take away from anybody's talent or ability, but I feel similarly about that with how they utilize Debo to an extent.
No, 1,000%. You're absolutely right. Whenever Debo's on the field, you have to account. Wherever he is, he has to be accounted for, because if you don't, it'll be a nightmare for you. So you're absolutely right. He does take a lot of pressure off of Brandon Ayuk. But like I said, I think that they're just not getting to that point where they can see him wide open. And a lot of it's because the past 2 weeks, this offensive line has either been manhandled by Myles Garrett, Taki, whoever the fuck else is on that Browns defensive line, who is just underrated and not talked about enough. And then the Vikings blitzing 57% of the time, which is outrageous, really messed with Brock, really made him have to get it out quicker. Because like Chuck said, he's all about anticipation and making the right throws with accuracy. That's really hard to do when you've already got somebody in your lap. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched that game. Danielle Hunter wrecked right guard Colton McKivitz all day long. And so that's really hard for you to do if you have to think, oh, shit, here comes this fucking 6'4", 290-pound defensive lineman. He's going to wreck me if I don't get this out of here. So they need to figure out a way to get him at least 3 seconds of time to process and do what he does best, or else this season's going to kind of sink really fast. I'll tell you that.
That is exactly, the way you just described all that, you just jogged my mind a little bit of and perfectly to put a bow on this is Brian Flores did the exact same thing against the Chargers, and Justin Herbert had one of the all-time best games a quarterback has ever played from, again, not just against a blitz, but from a completion percentage and a volume game. And it's because it wasn't really scheme dependent. It was just a really tall, talented dude ripping it to his alphas. And that's the complete parallel between where the Chargers are and where the 49ers are and how they're both trying to achieve success. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Definitely. Last guy I just thought to bring up, and it's not really an expectation thing, but it's something that I think is worth keeping an eye on, is Stephon Diggs, the current wide receiver number 2, seems upset.
Wild.
Seems upset after one bad loss in which he still saw 12 targets. But he I mean, hell, he saw what is it, 28 targets over the last 2 weeks. He had 16 the week before. So I mean, he seemed to be upset. He seemed to be this whole him and Josh Allen thing seems to be resurfacing a little bit. I don't know why. I don't know what the hell's going on. It can't be his usage. Do you think if the team starts to kind of go downward here, because I think they are ripe to do that. I still think they're a good team, and I'm not trying to overhype up the Patriots beating them here. I just think as a whole, the makeup of that team and Sean McDermott and the coach, it wouldn't shock me if they got in their own head here, they took a downturn. Do you think Diggs can keep this production up the rest of the season? Because I'm starting to feel a little hesitant that between Allen's shoulder and Diggs being pissy and the team not gelling, that we could see a massive second half regression here from him.
You want to take a check?
This one is wildly fascinating, and it's funny you brought this up. They're off to the best start offensively that they have been since Josh Allen's ever played quarterback for them. It's weird. It's just not translating to wins because the defense has really taken a fall because of the injuries that they've had. So I think it's really like, if you have a fantasy roster that's lost a player or two and you're like, do I trade? What do I have to do to change things up? Or do I just want to weather the storm, right? They're kind of in I hope they're in a weather in the storm scenario, because he's looking for Diggs when he should not be looking for Diggs. And it's working half the time because he's Josh Allen and Diggs is Diggs. But it'll be really interesting to see how the loss of Dawson Knox in the short term allows Kincaid to maybe, blossom into maturity. Because I like everything else that they're doing. Like, I like the running back usage. I love the Giggs hyper targeting. Obviously Gabe Davis was going to, have stretches where he's Gabe Davis and have stretches where he's Gabe Davis. So, and the way Diggs is playing, I see no reason why he can't keep this up for 2 or 3 more years if this is the offense they want to continue to roll out, which, when you look at the numbers, why wouldn't you?
I'm just not sure Sean McDermott is, it may sound surprising to say, I'm not sure if he's going to be the guy that's sticking around there long term. Buffalo as a whole just seems so pissed off right now. And like you said, I don't get it, because they're doing a lot of right things. And you mentioned Dalton Kincaid, I think, is going to step right in here. I think there was already signs of that happening before Knox got hurt. I still think Knox is going to play a role when he comes back. I mentioned this. We just released it inside the medical tent today. So go check that out over on the Injured List podcast, where we talk about Knox and Kincaid. But yeah, I think this is perfect for Kincaid to slide right in. We'll just see if Diggs wants to be even more hyper targeted. I think that's going to be a downfall for this team. I think they need to be more balanced with the tight ends and the running game. I don't think they need to be more balanced with Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is Gabe Davis. But a tight end needs to stay involved in this offense. Because if they just go one-dimensional with Diggs, I think they're in trouble. How do you feel about the Diggs, Allen, Buffalo, whatever we want to call this saga, Justin?
Well, it's October, boys, and it's about to be November. So snow's about to touch ground in Buffalo, which means they're going to have to start lighting tables on fire and going through them to stay warm. So I understand what Stephon Diggs is going through here. He is probably really pissed off. He's like, man, somebody's going to start lighting tables on fire, and I got to go through them just to stay warm. My sweater can't handle the Buffalo cold. But realistically, man, I think Stephon Diggs is the closest thing to Terrell Owens we've seen in a long time. And that's a compliment and an insult at the same time. He's a diva, yes, but he's so damn talented, he can be a diva. Sure. When he's on the field, you have to account for him with 2 or 3 defenders sometimes because he is that damn elusive and that damn good as a wide receiver. And also, guys, every single game that Stephon Diggs has, it's a whole new emotion. Like, he's either happy and elated that they won, or he's throwing a hissy fit on the sidelines. I'm not taking any of that into account. This is just week 7. It's about to be week 8. He's there for, I think, another 2 years. I don't think he's going to want to get out of that situation, because where is he going to go? Okay. Not a lot of playoff teams need a wide receiver right now. And realistically, nobody really wants to pay the price that Diggs is going to have. It's going to be a Devontae Adams type price where you're going to be asking for almost multiple firsts for this guy. I like this situation here. I think McDermott is going to stay a little bit longer too, but I think that it's going to get to that Andy Reid phase where it's going to start to be like, all right, so when are you going to cash in?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to make it to the Super Bowl? Are we going to get past the AFC Championship game? When are we going to start, cashing in on this roster? That might be the undoing of him, but at the same time, coaches have survived worse. I mean, I think Dick Duran survived 2 years in Jacksonville, and those teams were freaking terrible.
Yeah.
I would have fired Dick Duran upon looking at him.
God,
all good. What was that, Chuck?
I was gonna say I haven't heard Dick Duran in the longest time.
Me and my buddy were taking a road trip, and we were talking football, and he brought up Dick Duran. I was just like, the old Jacksonville coach? He's just like, yeah, the old Buffalo coach. I'm just like, oh, yeah. Buffalo was
right.
bad.
73 years old. God bless him.
Well, look, that's going to do it for us here tonight on TSS's Dynasty Hour. I'm Andrew LeDuc, a.k.a. Mr. Mallard. You can find me at Real Mr. Mallard on Twitter, joined by Justin Herrera at SemTexMex. There's numbers there, too, but you're cut off, so I forget the numbers, Justin. What are the numbers?
93.
93, thank you. And as always with Chuck Bass, at Chuck Bass FF on Twitter. We'll see you guys next week. The full squad will be here every Wednesday at 9:30. Check us out. We'll see ya.